Hello, this is Father Vincent Nguyen, a missionary priest in Iceland. Today is Thursday, September 25th, 2025, the 25th week in Ordinary Time. The Gospel today comes from Luke chapter 9, verses 7 through 9. Herod the tetrarch heard about all that was happening, and he was greatly perplexed, because some were saying, John has been raised from the dead. Others were saying, Elijah has appeared. Still others, one of the ancient prophets has arisen. But Herod said, John I beheaded. Who then is this about whom I hear such things? And he kept trying to see him. Today we have a rather short gospel account from St. Luke that makes reference to the beheading of St. John the Baptist. We can find the accounts of the beheading of St. John in the Gospels of St. Matthew and St. Mark. Among the bad characters of the Bible, so as to speak, Herod is one that we can study, especially as men, so to avoid repeating the same mistakes he did. Although this homily is directed towards men who are husbands and fathers, it is good for wives to understand the struggles that their husbands face, so to help them be better husbands and fathers. As the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches, marriage is ordered toward the good of the spouses. In other words, husbands and wives are supposed to strengthen and sanctify each other in the spiritual battle against evil and to obtain heaven together. Devin Shad, the director of the Fathers of St. Joseph, cautions men not to fall into common errors that makes them fail in their role as husbands and fathers. I mentioned only three and linked them to Herod's personality. First, he was not able to say no to his children and not able to step in when it is unpleasant. Second, he was a Disney dad, that is, refused to discipline and gives in to every whim. Third, he didn't stand against the wind of popular sentiments. The first error of Herod was that he was not able to say no to his children and not able to step in when it is unpleasant. In the Gospel of Mark, we remember how Herod promised to give anything to his daughter as a reward for dancing. We read, She went out and said to her mother, What shall I ask for? She replied, The head of John the Baptist. The girl hurried back to the king's presence and made her request. I want you to give me at once, on a platter, the head of John the Baptist. The king was deeply distressed, but because of his oaths and the guest, he did not wish to break his word to her. Now for Herod to say no in front of the guest and explain to his daughter during his birthday party that asking for the death of St. John the Baptist was immoral would be an uncomfortable thing to do. However, despite knowing that the request was immoral, and in the face of such discomfort, Herod reluctantly granted such a request. Children need moral direction and stability from the father, even if the children resist and don't obey sometimes. Actually, it is a moral obligation for the father to step in when his child is about to stray and make a morally questionable decision. The second error of Herod is he was a Disney dad, that is, refused to discipline and gives in to every whim. By Disney dad, we mean the dad who is like Genie from Aladdin, who grants every wish of his children. Before the beheading, we can infer that Herod did not discipline his daughter and taught her to distinguish good and evil. It was very difficult for Herod from the beginning because he himself was not leading a good life and giving good example to his daughter. When Herodias told the girl what to ask for, we can observe how there was no hesitation or doubt about asking for the death of the Baptist. We read, The girl hurried back to the king's presence and made her request. I want you to give me at once, on a platter, the head of John the Baptist. Herod was afraid of saying no and hence gave in to what his daughter asked for. We who are fathers should not be afraid of saying no to our children when they ask for something that is not in accord with God's commandments. By saying no to such things, we teach our children to reject sin. In fact, we fathers are responsible for the moral formation of our children. The third error of Herod was that he didn't stand against the wind of popular sentiments. Even though Herod wielded much grip and influence over his subjects, we see that in the end, Herod was afraid of his subjects. Herod was afraid that his subjects would think ill of him if he refused his daughter's request, which was the right thing to do. This is one of the many examples where someone makes a decision based on emotions and not on principles. In this case, Herod made a decision out of fear. We fathers need to be men of principles, that is, we don't change our principles in the face of pressure and opposition. We should always seek to choose the right thing to do, even if it is difficult. God causes men to provide stability to our families, especially when it is about moral stability. Stability is an essential element to masculinity. For those listeners who are husbands and fathers, we can learn from Herod's mistakes so we don't repeat them in family life. The practice of examination of conscience on our role as husbands and fathers can greatly help us. If we have failed our family in any way, we can go to confession and ask God for the graces we need to make up for our sins. For those listeners who are wives and mothers, you can be attentive to the needs of your husband and encourage him to make correct decisions in family life, even when it is difficult. By sanctifying your husband, who is the head of the family, you can sanctify the rest of your family. With the help of Mary, Queen of Families, let's ask God for the graces we need to be faithful to our families and be better parents.
If you found this video fruitful, please feel free to share it with a friend or family member. Or if you would like to learn more about our missionary priests throughout the world and how to support them, please visit iveamerica.org. Thank you for watching, and God bless.